Sounds good.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Lively U Virtual Learning Academy. Today's presentation is on sleep disturbances, and we're welcoming Anthony Pfeiffer here today from St. Luke's Family Medicine Residency, actually McLaren's, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So he will present for us today, so please welcome him.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I know that Danielle was going to be posting, and there it is, the outline, so you can kind of follow along. It says Dr. King at the top, but Dr. King is actually off today doing a required exam. So I'm pinch hitting, but that's okay because I've given this talk quite a few times over the past 20 plus years, and sometimes giving this talk is just a good reminder for me of some of the things I need to do. Changes in sleep in the elderly is something that a lot of us certainly think about as we get older, because probably starting about 40, 50 years old, there's a lot of changes, and there's a lot of reasons why that goes on, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But as it says at the top, sleep is basically that rejuvenation period that is essential for normal body function. So our body can only go for so long until it needs to rest. And, as it says there, the recommended period of time for sleep would be about 8 hours. Some people, we all know, can run on 5 hours sleep. Some people sleep for 10 plus hours. It just becomes an issue of what works best for most people. But certainly it becomes varied and certainly more interrupted as we get older. And this says there about a half of people who are 65 plus definitely have difficulty with sleeping. The importance of sleep is obvious. We need to maintain physical, mental, and emotional health. You can certainly tell when people get cranky because they don't have enough sleep. But sleep affects our cognitive functions, so how we think, how we function on a day-to-day basis. Without proper sleep, it interferes with our hormone balance and definitely with our immune system function. So a lot of people who don't get a proper amount of sleep are going to get worn down and be susceptible to greater infections of one kind or another. Loss of sleep or chronic use of sedating medications may also lead to falls or accidents. And we're going to get into that a little bit more, because to me, that's one of the take-home messages of this talk, is trying to reduce to zero the amount of sleep aids that we use, because they certainly have a lot of side effects, to include falls. So there's a lot of changes in sleep with age. One of them is more nighttime wakenings, what we call insomnia. There's two types of insomnia. There's short-term insomnia, and there's chronic insomnia. So there's people who have problems with sleeping just for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, and there's some people that it just goes on and on for a very long time. There's also people who are falling asleep a lot earlier as they get older. They might be, and part of that might be because they're shifting their daily habits. They used to maybe eat dinner at 6 o'clock and go to bed at 10, and now they're eating dinner at 4 o'clock and going to bed at 8. Some of that could be related to daylight savings time. There's a lot of people who have difficulty adjusting to the clocks being turned back an hour or turned ahead an hour, and certainly with seasonal changes. During the summer, it's still sunlight at 9 o'clock at night or 9:30, and now it's dark at 5 o'clock. And some people just associate darkness outside with, going to bed earlier. Less efficient sleep is one of those things that is very concerning because when you have less efficient sleep, as it says there, you get less deep sleep and less REM sleep. We could give a whole talk on just REM sleep. There's basically 4 different stages. And during REM sleep is when we do our dreaming. And if that gets interrupted, then it certainly messes with what we call our circadian rhythm and of how our biological clock is set up in our own individual bodies. And a lot of that leads to increased daytime napping. And we're going to talk a little bit about napping as well. Probably one of the bigger causes for sleep changes in the elderly is medical causes. Some of that is poor sleep conditions. We don't have good sleep hygiene is the term they use a lot. Do we have the room set up too hot? You know, your room should be dark and cool and free of noise, to include what they call white noise. Sometimes you can use that if that's necessary, but not laying in bed and watching TV for a couple of 3 hours at a time, or sitting there reading, you know, a couple of chapters in a book. We're going to talk about some proper sleep habits. Another reason that might have poor sleep is psychosocial causes. And this tends to be something that a lot of people experience, not necessarily depression or dementia, but the anxiety. It seems that as soon as our head hits the pillow is when we start to worry about things. We can't turn our mind off. We're thinking about a lot of, you know, what needs to be done, what are some of our worries and things like that. Medications is really a significant thing for older individuals. Particularly, as it says there's 4 different types of medications that tend to create changes, certainly with excessive wakefulness. We know about caffeine. Alcohol might be a sedative for some people. It might relax them and help them fall asleep, but for others, it has the opposite effect. If you're a smoker of any kind, nicotine will play a factor. People with thyroid problems. And then I kind of grouped the next 3 together: decongestants, bronchodilators, and steroids. So bronchodilators are things like inhalers that people have COPD, might be on a medication like Spiriva or Atrovent or something like that. Steroids are a big agitator of sleep because they make people a lot more hyper. I know when I was on steroids in the past, it certainly affected my sleep patterns. Some people experience nightmares around things like beta blockers, which are things for your heart. It might be something like metoprolol or Coreg or Tenormin, something like that. Antidepressants also are known to give people nightmares. There are some people that go throughout the day and have daytime sleepiness. What the fancy term for that is somnolence. Again, blood pressure medications might be a reason for that, as well as some of the others that we've already mentioned. And then nighttime urination is probably one of the biggest things for older individuals who have to get up once, twice, maybe even 3+ times a night, you know, because they're on diuretics. There's certainly blood pressure medications and beta blockers that also lead to nighttime urination. So you might not have problems falling asleep, but then you wake up in the middle of the night because you have that urge to use the restroom, and then you get back, and that's when your head hits the pillow, and now you're lying there wide awake because you're starting to think about things. Other reasons that aren't on there but might be causes of poor sleep is lack of exercise, maybe your diet, people who have very large meals, people who are eating spicy foods, And then for other people, it's a trained response. You might have said once or twice, well, I'm going to go to bed early, or I'm going to change my habits up a little bit, you know, for a week or two. And then all of a sudden that turns into a month or a few months. And now your body's trained to just be a certain way. And now you've altered your lifestyle as it pertains to sleep. Some of the sleep disorders are, as it mentions down there, the sleep cycle disturbance. So these are things like jet lag when you go from Northwest Ohio to the West Coast, and there's a 3-hour difference, and just trying to catch up with time there. You know, it might be 7 a.m. here, but it's 4 a.m. there, and that's when you're used to getting awake, and now you're trying to adapt. Periodic movements are something that are fairly common in individuals. You have restless leg syndrome. A lot of us have heard of that. Nocturnal myoclonus, which is a sudden jerking in your sleep. Those are certainly things that can affect you. And then probably one of the biggest ones that we just seem to hear a lot more in the last 10, 20 years is sleep apnea. So people who are snoring, feeling unrested when they wake up in the morning, that they're having a lot of daytime sleepiness. For all these sleep disorders, probably one of the biggest things that you need to consider is seeing your physician and letting them know what's going on, because you might need to have a sleep study. That is typically something that's done at an outpatient facility. I know that McLaren St. Luke's Hospital has one of those, Flower Hospital has one of those, and you're required to spend the night, and they hook you up to electrodes and everything to be able to monitor things. The good news is, pertaining to sleep changes, is that there are treatments, and some of this is where we take ownership of it and are able to do things for ourselves. Certainly there's conservative measures like it mentions, and as I alluded to earlier, having the right environment, being it quiet, having it dark, and having it cool. A lot of people like to turn up their thermostats in the evening and get under, 2 or 3 blankets, but you probably should have your settings. It's going to be different for some people, but probably around 63. I've even seen it as low as 60 degrees, having those things. Another thing that you can take ownership of is correcting what your medical problems are. I mentioned some things like, heart conditions, lung conditions, and that, making sure that you're on the proper medication, making sure that you are taking care of yourself. And then, as I said, good sleep hygiene. So trying to limit your naps to once a day, less than an hour long. If you're napping for more than an hour, you need to try and find a way to correct that. Force yourself to get up and start moving. I'm guilty of taking a nap. However, I'm good with a 10-minute nap, with what I call a good power nap. If you go to bed and you're not sleeping yet, and you find that you're not falling asleep in the next 15 to 30 minutes, get up and do something and go back to bed when you're tired. Your bed should be where you sleep. Try and go to bed at a regular time, trying to get up at a regular time, trying to be a little regimented in that, trying to get some exercise in either in the morning or the afternoon, getting a little sunlight during the day. Obviously that's challenging in Northwest Ohio during the winter months, but if you can take advantage of when there's a break in the clouds, certainly doing that. If you're an evening snacker when you're watching television or something like that, try and keep your snacks light. Yogurt, popcorn, things like that, but avoiding large meals. Definitely limiting your your fluid intake before you go to bed. So not having a cup of coffee or a large glass of water. I mean, if you need to take some nighttime pills, just taking sips of water, not having a couple of beers, all those types of things will certainly force you to have to get up in the middle of the night, like I talked about. But if possible, the segue into the next one is avoiding alcohol and caffeine and nicotine, things that are tend to be stimulants for a lot of people. And find a way to wind down each night. If it's yoga, progressive muscle relaxation is an excellent, excellent thing. If you go on a website like YouTube and you type in progressive muscle relaxation, there's a lot of things like guided imagery, which I highly encourage for anybody, not only if you're having problems sleeping, but if you have problems related to anxiety, and that meditation works very well for a lot of people. It's never too late in life to learn meditation. And then making sure that you use your bed only for sleep or sexual activity. One of the things that, as I've mentioned already a couple of times, if you're using bed to watch TV or read, that's not a good approach. And then finally, keeping a sleep log. A sleep log is good for two reasons. Number one, if you got a lot of things on your mind, you write all this stuff in a sleep log, all your worries, and then once you close that book, you said, okay, I'm done for the day. I've turned that off. I've shared that. I've shared my thoughts with someone in my journal, and you can start to sleep. The other thing that helps with the sleep log is if you're going to have to go see your physician because of having sleep issues, you can be able to share that with them and being able to say, okay, I only slept 2 hours this day, or I slept 4, then I was up for a couple, then I was able to sleep for 1, so that they can kind of see some patterns and see if it's anything medical that they might be able to help with. There are some medications that are out there. Antidepressants certainly help some people. I know of somebody that recently got put on not necessarily an antidepressant, but an anti-anxiety medication that they take before bed. That's helped them a little bit. Melatonin, we've heard a lot about over time. It's one of those natural sleep aids that works very well for some people. I encourage you, if you're going to do that, take it 30 minutes before you go to bed to help it be able to kick in. And then, you know, if you have sleep apnea, it's certainly something that you need to think about having addressed because it can lead to other complications in your health. Some people might have to be put on a CPAP, or even doing things like physical activity and doing some weight loss is going to contribute to you probably being able to rest a little bit more easily at night. If you have restless leg or that, as it says, periodic limb movement disorder, there's certain types of medications that can help with that. Perhaps it's an iron deficiency. And then there's short-term sleep aids. And I don't discourage these because certainly some people need them. I just mentioned the anti-anxiety medication like Ativan. And then there's Ambien. But some of these things can be addicting. And some people are going to rely on these things. And then sometimes people combine these with alcohol, which is a bad mix. My concern about sleep aids is it may help you fall asleep, but if you're one of these people that has frequent nighttime urination and you're having to get up and now you're even more groggy, there's a greater potential for fall. When I used to work nighttime in the ER, I used to have quite a few people coming in for problems related to that because they get a little disoriented. So need to kind of watch that. And then, you want to avoid certain antihistamines because they can have, actually, it affects people in two different ways. It can actually be a hyper. So these people may have problems falling asleep because of the long duration of these medications, but they can also create increased grogginess and things like that. So if you're a person that needs to take Claritin or Zyrtec or Benadryl, something like that, you hear a lot people say, well, Benadryl will help somebody relax. My oldest son, it has the exact opposite effect on him. He becomes very hypersensitive to medications like that. But as it says finally at the bottom too, may cause confusion or constipation. So there's other side effects that go along with that. So that's kind of the gist of today's talk. I'm not sure I would have done it as much justice as Dr. King, but just wanted to hit some of the high points because, as certainly 2020 was very challenging. We're at home more. We're not possibly getting out as much. So our sleep habits might be changing a little bit, but we want to stay cognizant of these things so that we can stay as healthy and as independent for as long as possible. I know that there was a couple of comments on the side.
I'm going to just go ahead and allow for some questions and answers, and we'll just kind of stop the recording.